Yeah, we're live now.
You're live, we're live, we're live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first Standing Advisory Council of Education meeting, abbreviated to SACRA, of 2024. What I'm going to do is go around the table and ask everyone to introduce themselves. I'm Cecile Wright, and I'm one of the local councillors. I'm the councillor for Arboretum Ward in Derby, a ward where I grew up. In terms of my background, I'm an academic, worked specifically in the area of education. So that's me. I can then go Stevie.
Hi, I'm Steve Ford. I'm lead officer to the Derby City SACRA and currently the Derbyshire SACRA. So I've been responsible for organising the revision of the agreed syllabus, and every time I do it, I say, that's my last one. And I've been saying that for about 20 years. But there is another one coming up. It'll be a major piece of work for the city, Derbyshire, to do in 2025. But I'm excited by developments in the city.
I'm here as an observer to join as a full member with the National Education Unions and Group C.
No, Wendy Harding, National Education Union. It's an exciting time.
I'm here formerly was a prison chaplain, a hospital chaplain, so from a pastoral some background in education. I have two of them I haven't seen for years. So, to the very wise gentleman there, Dr. Dylan, I was 15 colleagues. He was the lecturer in biology, I think. Now the lecturer in sociology at the Joseph Wright Centre. And then Imran here was a colleague as a student. So we both studied at Wilmorton College. I just realised that between 2 years ago. Lovely to meet you.
Worrying.
My name is Aki Vaya. My role is as a teacher. I take this curriculum. Our students are across 5 different centres, 1,000 students at the minute, where we teach them different social skills along with religious education as well. And that curriculum.
I'm Sharon Buckby. I'm the Director for Learning, Inclusion and Skills at Derby City Council. I'm really going to be there today.
Ashby, I'm another local councillor. I'm a councillor in Abbey Ward. And up until July, I worked as an advanced nurse practitioner. I've been in the NHS for almost 48 years. Now I'm filling my time as council work instead. I'm very pleased to be.
I'm Eve Saka. I'm the Jewish representative. My background is secondary RE teaching, but I do all sorts of freelance stuff now.
Already been introduced. Dr. Fadel Singh. I'm a retired biologist from Derby College, where I taught for about 29 years. And Multi-Faith Centre, the original founder of it. I also represented here the Sikh faith from Guru Arjan Dev Gurdwara since 1999, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi all, Pop Gill, I'm the service manager for community safety here at Derby City Council. I'm just purely here as a kind of an observer / visitor today. It was a conversation I had with Sharon just over a week ago. There's obviously things that we do in community safety that has an impact on communities and vice versa. So just wanted to come along and see what you do.
I'm Dominic Monaghan. I'm a Democratic Services Officer here at Derby City Council, and I'm the clerk to SACRE.
And I'm Judith Willis. I'm a member of Broadway Baptist Church, so I'm a non-denominational churches. My background is I was a primary school teacher, assistant head, and I still work for the Derby University part-time as a mentoring students who wish to become primary teachers.
I'm Viv Lawrence. I was a primary school teacher, like my assistant head for a while. We then went on to become the education officer at the cathedral. That role sadly was lost during the pandemic, and I now work at the airport. It was fun. Similar. Zoe Higgins, Church of England, and I'm also a primary school teacher. And I also work in Britain RE resources for schools across the country.
So welcome everyone. As a relatively new chair who was elected at our last meeting. I don't see many people with an agenda. So do they not normally get an agenda on it? As such, well, the next item here is the late items to be introduced by me, the chair, and the item relates to membership resignations and vacancies. Dominic, do you want to just go through what the nominees are?
So just to let everyone know, the Group C representative that's being put forward, I've jumped the gun on that one. He needs to go through the NEU first, so I think we'll put that for the next meeting.
Right, okay.
Yeah, please say we have 2 new representatives being put forward for the Islamic faith, and you can see the list of members who've resigned since the last meeting. If SACRE would like, we can send out letters to them thanking them for their service. And then at the bottom of the page, you can see the list of vacancies we have at the minute.
Yes.
So again, we send emails out asking them to put forward.
Yes. Yes.
We'll be doing a big recruitment drive later in the year, but for now,
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Declaration of interest is the next one. That's if you give a definition on what constitutes
so
declaration of interest.
yeah, so it's basically if there's anything on the agenda that anyone feels like they can't take a view on or discuss without it sort of being impacted by their work or anything like that, then they can declare an interest, but I can't think of Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
I think we just missed apologies.
Yes, okay. Yes, I'm going back to apologies, please.
So we have apologies for Councillor Lonsdale, Councillor Martin, Councillor Morgan McGeehan, and Phil Royal.
Okay. Thank you. Right, we have a guest speaker who will be addressing us shortly. He's quietly setting up his display, so we will proceed with the agenda until you will be your. The minutes of the last meeting, which was the 4th of October. If we can, initially on True Record, so page 1. True Records, page 2. And the final page, page 3. There are no corrections as such. Do we have to confirm these votes are true?
Yes.
So for those who were present, can we have some confirmation, please? A confirmation. Yes. Okay. Unless the burning for those who have a copy of the minutes, unless you have anything to read. proceed to.
It's like the party appointment. Please.
Yeah, so this is just an opportunity for anyone to put themselves forward to be the Group A, which is Christianity and other world faiths, or Group B, which is the Church of England. If there are any questions for Group B?
I can do it. I've done it before. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's E for Group A. Are there any nominations for Group B?
It's me.
Yeah. That's it. Yep, that's that.
Okay. Oh. George, how are you with your prep? Are you ready to, do you want to be 1 minute? Okay.
So if you want to item 7.
Yes. Okay, I will do. Okay. Is that E? Oh, you can do you, Steve.
Yes, if I could just speak before Chair, just to say that Wendy and myself said this is an exciting time. It's an exciting time, I think, because we do have to make decisions about the agreed syllabus. But we also have to recover, I think, from the impact of COVID upon this group. Those of us who've been around have been somewhat frustrated on occasions by the fact that we've not always been worked. And that's made notions of continuity and momentum difficult to sustain. But at the last meeting, we decided that what we needed was a working group work between the main Saturday meetings to determine, among other things, what the substantial issues were for us and how we could become more dynamic and effective in the roles that we are forming. And just like, I'm not going to ask you to introduce yourselves, but if you are a member of that working group, and some folks aren't here, just put your hand up now, would you? Very much. So we are excited, and colleagues from the working group will be speaking later, but it is our intention to be a more dynamic group as a direct consequence of having the opportunity to prepare and share the responsibility where we're going and what we're about. And much of the agenda this evening addresses those kinds of issues. But it begins, when the time was right for George, it begins with the presentation on regrowth. And all of you will probably feel it as well. There is a great need now for us to look at issues of social cohesion and inclusion, and what that might mean within context of Derby City. Some of you were here, I think, when Teresa Peltier, our sheriff, spoke to us and talked to them. And in that same meeting, the performance of an instrument, which was a theatre piece around the Holocaust and the power of music, was also explained to us. And that was subsequently wonderful when things come together. Your professional and personal life comes together, and we have an opportunity to see that performance. And some folks attended it in Wirksworth as part and parcel of our ongoing commitment. And it may well be at some stage that theatre group who are now working on a piece around Holy Island and its importance in the past. It may be that we decide as a group that that's something we want to explore. So lots of things happening. Let me also give a nod to Sharon, if I may. Sharon has suggested that our next meeting might be held at the Makers Museum. Now, I understand it has recovered from its flooding.
It has, yeah.
And it might be nice, might it not? I know the working group took a decision that actually we'd like to be in more informal circumstances than the council chamber. Everybody offered a sigh of relief tonight. So from now on, if we're if we want to establish the principle of where do we want to meet in different venues around the city on occasions, it might well be, Dominic, if you could explore the Makers Museum for the next meeting, that might be useful. Wendy.
Question, Chair. If we go somewhere else, we're broadcast, aren't we, on YouTube? Would we be able to accommodate that?
We have a meeting space which is like pretty much exactly like this room, just not as big, but it's all wired up, and you can have like conference calls and you can send them online stream. That should be
Excellent.
Chair, would
Yes, I was.
so just to give a reason, some background as to why I thought about the Makers Museum, I absolutely love it. Really love being immersed there. But I also think that one of the things, and actually it was the fact that George was speaking today about Windrush, and I was thinking, we're not really, how do we as faith leaders and community groups, how are we enabled to see the wondrous developments in the Makers Museum, but from the different communities that were part and parcel of developing that, and social histories around that, and the voices of our communities in there.
So there's been a historical issue with the museum making, where you tell the really good history of the city in terms of it being a city of industry. But one of the things that we don't do very well is tell how the people who operated these machineries. And so, the diaspora from the South Asian community and the West Indian community and other places involved as well. But I'm really pleased to say that there is a current project happening at the moment, and it's to collect oral histories and photographic archives from the South Asian community across Normanton and across the city. There is going to be an exhibition in, I think, mid-April to May, which will show some of that and will become permanent parts of the exhibition at the museum making as well. And so materials about to come out soon, and I'll be putting a lot of those posters up around Normanton. But I can also bring some of that material here and share with the groups here as well.
And I think that would be wonderful, Chair, because that then gives us a chance to also think about faith in the context of the city and the community and industry as well.
And also, I think it's important for the museum to be like representative of the people of the city, for that to be sort of geared into education as well, probably through this group here, in terms of trying to create resources that young people can engage with the history of their ancestors and their lives in the city and how they made it the city of Derby their home.
Well, I went to myself, my colleague and I, Councillor Ashby, went to the reopening of the museum last week following the temporary closure due to being impacted by the flood. And you are right that it provides a space for narrating a range of things, different demographics and their contribution to the life of Derby. And I do welcome the fact that there is the aspiration to make those contributions more explicit. However, I have to say that those contributions are implicit in what it tells us about the Industrial Revolution development. What had happened, which Derby played a major role in, as you all know, would not have happened if those that were the pioneers did not go elsewhere and extract material, indeed, to create the industries, and part of extracting that material was sadly also extracting bodies from around the world to go with plantations to create the resources to fund the industries and our seats of learning universities, which not only University of Ireland, elementary. So yes, I welcome us being situated within that, as including the
I think just as an extra to say that there's actually a lot of work that needs to be done with the communities who have those stories, which centres around trust building for them to even trust some of these institutions to be able to tell their stories of migration and partition and various other traumatic events that have happened. And so it's a role to play in terms of communication for them.
Thank you. Councillor Ashby, then Eve Saka, please.
Can I just ask a question as I sit here and think of this? One of the things that struck me earlier, which I have no idea about, is that we have representatives from different churches and faiths. There's no representative from the Catholic Church. Now, I know Catholic churches often have their own schools, but there will also be a lot of Catholic children in the schools.
We do have a representative, just they haven't come to this meeting. We do have.
I didn't know, because when I looked at the minutes, I didn't see anything about a Catholic rep.
It's Rachel Snowden Ball from what I remember.
And similarly, I did ask also about the black churches. There are many now.
Yeah,
I respect it.
Well, it's kind of in my head also tied in with the conversation about the history of the city, because probably there's a greater representation of the Catholic, of the Irish community in Catholic churches than in some of the other communities. That would be also good to help as part of the representation of the history. So, and I have to confess, I've been in Derby 20 years, but I have no idea about the history of the Irish community in the city. This is in odd snippets. Probably people here who've grown up in Derby know a lot more than I do.
Absolutely. Eve, please.
I think all wonderful, but I think Derby has a slight problem of working in little pockets and not really talking to each other. So I'm aware of something going on at the Multi-Faith Centre. I'm Jewish trustee at the Multi-Faith Centre through the faith development workers of trying to do something very similar for the Jewish community. And we're working with someone at the university to do that. So it would be nice. I don't think this is the committee for it, because we're meant to be talking about education, but we need to be working together and not working in little pockets or spread over the place.
Absolutely. Hey, right. George, are you ready?
Cecilia, it's the perfect introduction, George. It is our history and the development of our understanding and the passion that we have here to be more sophisticated in our understanding of Derby City and its different communities, the way we see them come together. Without more ado,
Yes, I would like to introduce guest speaker, George Grinion, to 2 days meeting. It was a delight to have your partner come and address us some few meetings back. So George, when you are ready, please address us in terms of the Windrush narrative.
Actually, the point that I want to point that you made, I was at Derby University last week, and I've made 4 documentaries, film documentaries. And the film documentary I made recently, editing last week, is to do with a term called Barrow Children. Cecile knows what this is all about. But in the process of putting this documentary together, I was approached by a guy called Phil Bassey.
That's who we're working.
Yes, that's why I came to Phil Bassey. Davey, an Irish guy.
I know Phil.
Right. And they have approached someone from the Jewish community. So basically, I think it's what...
It's probably through our little group.
Yeah.
Yes.
And bringing these various groups together. The point that you made is so valid. We're all in little pockets in Derby. And so they've approached me to have my input with the Caribbean community. Phil is doing the Hindu community. Dave is doing the Irish Catholic community. There's someone that's doing the Jewish community. And someone has been approached about the Ukrainian community as well, I believe. So it looks as though it's all going to come together. Yeah, which is good. which is good news.
Nothing on the Pakistani and the Indian community.
Well,
I was just going to say,
We are.
we are available if you need us.
I'm not.
Can you take that back, or do you want me to write formally and ask that they broaden out the
Well,
proposal?
I was just approached
Yeah.
about it. So they approached me for the Caribbean community, but I'm pretty certain because they're keen on doing it
Okay,
properly,
okay.
they will more than likely have approached lots of different people. So, and if they haven't, I will be speaking with
Yeah.
Cecile so that she can contact you guys. So everybody will be included. Right, Windrush. Where do I start with this? This exhibition I have had in my heart and in my head for the last 25 years. Anyone from any community, whether it's the Pakistani community, Sikh community, blah, 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 I believe it's in your heart and you know that community and you believe in that community. My parents were born in Jamaica. I was born here in Derby. And I grew up in an environment where I felt loved by all of the Caribbean community, including Cecile's mum and dad, who were very, very close friends of my parents. Her dad and my father were both truck drivers. And her dad would come to my dad's house and they'd bore us all crapless talking about trucks and bits of trucks and, you know, blah, blah, in Jamaica and all this sort of stuff. So this is something that's dear to my heart. I decided to actually do the Windrush exhibition last year, to actually bring it all together for two reasons. Number one, my partner Teresa became the first Black High Sheriff in Derbyshire's history, which was obviously significant. And secondly, last year was the 75th anniversary of the Windrush ship arriving at Tilbury Docks in London. On that ship was this gentleman, Mr. Thomas Dowse, right? Now, I see a lot of vacant looks around the room. I'm guessing that most of you don't know who this man was. Okay, as I say, Mr. Dowse arrived on the ship. So when you see the old black and white footage of the Windrush ship arriving at Tilbury Docks, in that film footage is Mr. Dowse. Right, so every time you see the film, you'll see Mr. Dowse. He arrived as a 22-year-old and his docket is here. And it says that he's a shoemaker. He had no idea where he was going to go in the UK, but they were excited about coming to England because it was this thing that England, Britain is the mother country and you're going to better yourself. So he came over and he slept for 2 weeks in a disused shelter, bomb shelter in London. And he saw an advert for a job at Stanton Staveley near Chesterfield, rather. So he went and followed this job inquiry up, got the job, worked there for a while, and then he was told, you're better off living in Derby, mate, because it's a bit rural out this neck of the woods, and you know, you're a black man out in the sticks, so it's probably going to be a bit difficult. So he moved into Derby. This is all within a matter of weeks, months, and he lived on Reeves Road. I don't know if any of you guys know where Reeves Road is.
I know where it is.
Near to Dairy House Road.
Yeah.
Which is where most of the Caribbeans and the Asian community came, because most of those properties were cheaper, they were easier to buy, so hence my people and these people came and settled there. Mr. Dowse was the first. So he arrived, and the house next door to where he was renting was a very pretty white lady by the name of Iris Martin. And he fell for this lady, and then he married her. And that's one of, if not the first mixed marriage in Derbyshire's history. And that wedding happened here. So that picture is at the back of the council house. So that's where they were married. And they became a real force. Mr. Dowse was an entrepreneur. He came with absolutely nothing, right? And then what he did was to buy properties. So anyone who knows the history of this country knows that at that time, it would have been difficult for a non-white to buy a property. And he went out on a mission and he bought a number of properties. And his objective was, he knew that there would be a lot of Caribbeans following him to Derby, which there was. And one of those that followed was my father, who arrived in 1954. And my dad came to Derby purely on a whim. This is no joke. He was on the ship called the Castle Verde, coming over from Jamaica to this country. Ship docked at, the ship went from Kingston to Barcelona briefly, from Barcelona to southern Italy. He then caught a train from southern Italy all the way up to Calais, then got a ferry from Calais to Folkestone, then got the train from Folkestone to London. And then at London, he was hoping to meet someone and the person didn't turn up. So the way he describes it, he said, an old bloke said, "Son, what you gonna do now?" And my dad said, "Anywhere you're going, I'm going." And this chap was going to Leopold Street. This is all true. Right? The chap that he spoke to, he said was an old bloke, was actually just 4 years older than him. But to him, he was an old guy, right? And he followed this guy called Josh Green, yeah, to Derby. And my dad's first night was spent sleeping at one of Mr. Dowse's properties, all right? Now, this story, you could make a film out of it, because Teresa, my partner, who is now the High Sheriff, was adopted at birth. And she was adopted by a white family who lived in Ashbourne. So she was brought up in the whitest of white villages in Derbyshire. One of only 3 black people in Ashbourne. The other 2 were adopted sisters. Yeah. So she was raised in Ashbourne. And by her own admission, I'm not saying anything that she won't tell you herself. She had a horrid time. She hated it. This is 1960s Britain. And so the earliest opportunity that she had, she left school, she moved to Derby. And guess where she lived? Mr. Dowse's house. Now, she obviously had no idea she was going to meet me. She had no idea that my dad had come in 1954 and lived at Mr. Dowse's house. But it's that symmetry. What this man did, coming from the Caribbean to help not just his own Caribbean community, but all the community. Now, what he also did was he bought a shop, which is still there. He died in 2008. He died a while ago. But the shop he had for many, many years, and it's on the corner of Molyneux Street and Cambridge Street. And it's called Sunshine Supermarket. It's still there. Now, I commissioned a plaque, and I had a plaque put up on that shop on the 24th of June last year. Because personally, I feel that the real black heroes from this town are not recognised. The only recognition I'm aware of in Derby is Louis Martin. I don't know. Now, I've actually got a banner on Louis Martin, but it's currently in Teresa's car.
And Mr. Mighty, you might have come across Mr. Mighty.
Mr. George Mighty. Yeah, George Mighty. I'll tell you about George Mighty in a second. However, Louis Martin Louis Martin actually is the most decorated weightlifter in British history, yet he's from Jamaica.
I used to attend his. Right, a youngster.
So this is a man that came from the Caribbean, could have represented Jamaica, but chose to represent Britain.
Yeah.
And he won gold medals at the Commonwealth Games, at the Olympics. He was amazing. And there is a walk of fame thing somewhere in Derby in the city centre. But I find it, I'm pleased that that has happened, that they've recognised him. But what I'm not comfortable with is the fact that he had to be someone that represented this country and was recognised because he's high profile. This guy, in my personal opinion, has done far more for the community than someone that lifted a few weights, which was great. But what this man did, in addition to having the shop and having properties, which enabled black people to have somewhere to live. We all heard about the signs, no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. So blacks are in league with dogs. Basically, that was the sign that was put on. So if this guy did not have the wherewithal to have properties, my father would have struggled for somewhere to live. My mum arrived a year after and moved into one of Mr. Dowse's houses next door to where my dad was, and that's how they met. So without Mr. Dowse, I wouldn't be here. So all of this, for me, is so important. And you mentioned George Mighty. Right, that's a contentious one for me because George Mighty, and I'll just explain, George Mighty runs the Derby West Indian Association, right, centre. Now, if you didn't know any better, you'd think the guy built it himself and ran it. You know, this guy's laughing, so I guess, you know, this organisation, the Derby West Indian Association, the Derby West Indian Centre, was started by this man, Charles Sheridan Hill. This man is the second black JP in Britain's history, the first one in Derby. This man was truly amazing. So my focus has been on highlighting people from the Caribbean that have made a real difference, not a superficial difference, but a real difference. There's a picture of this man here doing a meeting, I think it's about 1960, 1961, at the Normanton Hotel, where he was getting, but what the concerns were was that by 1960, there was a massive, Mr. Dowse, I'm jumping around a bit, but it all makes sense. He arrived in 1948. On the Windrush ship, there was over 1,000 passengers, but there's only about 530 that were actually from the Caribbean. People think there was all these people that came off the ship from the Caribbean. That's not so. And then there was a bit of a lull, and then the Caribbean started to come en masse from the early 1950s. The peak was from about 1954 to about 1958, 59. That's when the majority came over from the Caribbean. Now, when they came and settled, they had problems with housing, all sorts of stuff, but there was no one coordinating it and saying, oh, we need to sort this out, we need to sort that out. That's what this man did. That's what this guy did. It was him that had the concept of having a West Indian Centre so that folks could go to with their concerns and express their concerns, and you have a committee where they sit down and say, okay, how can we deal with this? And that's what he started. But if you go to the Derby West Indian Centre, you'll see very little evidence of him. And that's because George Mighty wants it to be about himself. I don't want to get all political, but I've got to get that off my chest.
I think this man was also instrumental in setting up both the Indian Community Centre and the Pakistani Community Centre.
That wouldn't not surprise me.
He was a man. Yeah,
Yeah.
he helped.
Yeah,
He was
This guy,
Nominal.
I've got 3 banners. I've got lots of banners, and if I'm going to do it, I do it properly. So I've got 3 banners of him. This is the first one, so it just gives you a picture. But then I've got another banner, which has got lots of letters on it, and one of the letters is from Kingsway Hospital, right? And this is 1963, I think it is. And the letter is a letter from Kingsway Hospital sent to Mr. Charles Sheridan Hill saying, we've got a coloured patient here that we're struggling to deal with, and it would be best if he was sent back home, right? So we don't want to deal with him. And Mr. Charles Sheridan Hill took that guy to his house, paid for the guy to go back to Jamaica, and drove him down to the airport. So he took that responsibility on himself at his own cost. You know, that to me, that's mind blowing. You know, the easiest thing to do is, well, it's your problem. You're the hospital. You deal with it. But he didn't. He didn't. You know, so this guy's amazing. This guy's amazing.
Can I also say?
Sure.
Charles here. And it's pertinent because we're here as an advisory group for education. He was instrumental in pioneering what we call supplementary school. Because children of Jamaican origin, or those like yourself, firstborn, were having difficulties in the schooling system, and the community felt that the community needed to intervene to supplement the difficulties that Black children were experiencing in education in Derby, and he established, and I was one of the beneficiaries.
Well, the thing is,
schools
the documentaries that I've made, they are, one of the documentaries is based on our elders.
Yes, of course.
And literally their journey, you know, and it's fascinating. I cry and laugh at the same time when I'm talking to these, and all of them, I must have interviewed about 20, and they're all, you know, in the Jamaican patois. Oh, I don't know what to say. I don't think it was worth me talking. And then the moment you get the camera in front of them, don't shut up. You know, they just go on and on and on. I have to edit loads of this stuff. But it's amazing because I asked them, what were your thoughts about the UK before you arrived? And every one of them, to a person, said the same thing. Oh, we're so excited, we're going to the mother country. So they had all been, I don't want to say brainwashed, but given this thought that they were going to come here, they were going to be welcomed with open arms, the streets were paved with gold, they're going to make their fortune, and then they're going to go back possibly to Jamaica with loads of money and da-da-da-da-da and all the rest of it. No. And then I'd say to them, what was the reality when you arrived here? And there's one lady called Lynette. I can't remember Lynette's surname. She's so sweet. And she was telling me about the accommodation that she first got. She had to share it. And it was an attic room. And they had effectively a curtain that divided the rooms. And there was a man on the other side. But because they were desperate for accommodation, she had to accept it, you know. And she said that she would get up to go to work in the morning. This is back in the good old days when you had to put money for the gas in the meter. And there was a certain amount of hot water. And if the folks that went into the bathroom before you had used all the hot water, you were washing in cold water and all of that sort of thing. And then she said she'd leave home, get on the bus. And she says she remembers once she got on the bus and sat on the bus. And this chap came and he wouldn't sit next to her. So what he did was sat on the edge of the seat because he didn't want to be close to her. You know, so this is someone that came with real goodness in her heart to come and support this country. Because bearing in mind, the whole point of this country was bankrupt after the Second World War. Bankrupt of money because the war effort had drained them financially, and bankrupt of manpower because so many men had died in the Second World War. So effectively, Black people were doing this country a favor coming over here working, but the action that they had was not great. So it's important to me because I recall clearly hearing some of the stories that my mother and father not would tell me because I was very young, but when they were talking amongst each other, my heart would sink. And I'll give you one. Cecile knows my mum was a nurse and she was very close. And my mum came and she was always a happy, jolly woman. And she came home one evening and she was really downbeat. And my dad was a character. He's a very funny guy, but also very dour at times. And he said, "What's wrong with you?" And my mum said, "No, nothing. And he said, "What do you?" Which is not going to elicit a sort of favourable response, is it? Because you just sound very aggressive. And she said, oh, I just had an experience at work today. And I'm eavesdropping. And he said, well, what was it? And basically there was a car accident and a chap had been brought in and he was badly mangled up. And she had the responsibility of cutting the clothes off him so they could dress him and one thing or another. And despite the fact that this guy was badly mangled up and, you know, he's desperate to, you know, get patched up, he still had the wherewithal to say to my mum, take your black hands off me. So, you know, and this is a woman that genuinely loved everybody. Cecile can testify to that. My mum was like the most loving woman ever. I always joke that if Adolf Hitler walked into our house, she'd say, you've been a naughty boy, don't do it again. You know, she didn't have a bad word to say about anybody. She always wanted to love first. That's the key thing. So what these people had to deal with and had to go through to make opportunities for the likes of myself and for Cecile, for me, is something that I have to recognize, I have to bring to people's attention because it's so important to me. And it's something I think is even more significant now because I went to the Museum of Making a week ago Saturday, and there was an event that Teresa and I were invited to called the Jamie Simpson Trust. And Jamie Simpson, very simply, was a lovely young man that worked for Matalan in London. And a couple of guys came into Matalan with the intention of robbing the place. And he attempted to stop them robbing the place because he was the manager. And he was stabbed and died. Yeah, and it's tragic, absolutely awful situation. So she set up this trust to stop knife crime, and we were talking about knife crime, and it's for me, I believe that a lot of what was passed on from Cecile's parents and my parents to us has somehow got lost, passed on to younger generations. And they asked me to talk, and I sort of raised the point that when my parents were going around Derby, in the limited sense, in the 1950s and 1960s, because there were only certain pubs that they could go to, the Grange and the Cambridge pub and what have you. And then in my era, we would go out, but we would always be careful of where we were going to go for fear of, because I'm 67 this year. And back when I was young, there were skinheads, and these were not the fashionable skinheads. These were National Front skinheads back then. So I knew if I went to certain areas of Derby or Derbyshire, Codner, Heanor, etc., these places were notorious for having guys that just focused on non-whites and wanted to batter them. Now, what I made to the point I made to these young people was, if we needed an excuse to carry a knife, we had it, because we needed to protect ourselves, but we never. All of my guys, the guys that I went to my school with, I went to Pear Tree School, which then became Homelands. And there was a group of guys that I'm blessed are still my friends. Most of them are still alive to this day. So I've known these guys for over 60 years. And I can guarantee you, not one of us ever carried a knife. Yet for some reason, these youngsters, this belief that they need to carry a knife, I don't understand. So for me, going back to the beginning, I want to get this message across to youngsters so they understand that there is a connection between what this man did. This man came over and with nothing built an empire. Didn't kill anybody, didn't stab anybody, had lots of crap to deal with and just got on with it. And yet you've got youngsters that have got iPads, they've got this, they've got that. As a youngster, I can never remember catching a taxi even. You know, we had to walk to school across 6 main roads to get to school, but we did it. Now, you know, I just feel that I'm going off at a tangent now, sorry. Youngsters, yeah, I know, but kids, yeah, ran to. But yeah, the knife crime thing is something that we need to, I'm passionate about, and I want to look at. Right. Any questions from anybody? Yes, sir.
I think it would be nice if what you said today, something like that was recorded and presumably presented or sent to all the schools in Derbyshire.
Great idea. I'm on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kept myself shut when you were talking about Petrie School and Dickey Bars or Cambridge, because I grew up in that environment.
Yeah.
And 5 of us slept in one room.
Yeah.
I was the youngster. You're 67, I'm 70.
Right. Yeah.
Myself, my dad,
Yeah.
landlord,
Yeah.
2 others.
Yeah.
In one room.
Yeah.
And I was the youngster.
Yeah.
They were the one who went to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went to Dale School.
Dale.
So you are my neighbor.
Well, last week when I did the other week.
And I could talk about all about it all night. Because this is my history.
There's Teresa and I brought a stage play to Derby Theatre last year called Rush, The Joyous Jamaican Journey. And it's amazing. And basically there's a band on stage, there's a narrator, and he talks about this, you know, but he talks about it nationally. I focused on Derby. But one of the phrases that he used and I picked up on, I thought I've got to use that. And this is a shared story.
Yeah.
You know, I know where you've come from. You know where I come from.
You mentioned Molyneux Street and so on.
Yeah.
I believe that I went into his store.
Yeah.
I think I might have seen him.
Yeah, you will have.
There's a post office next on the other.
On the other side, the corner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 I fully remember that.
But it's coming back to the point that this lady said, when I was at school, we had Peter Jasvineski, Gino Trunzo, Gino Roper. It was like a United Nations when we were like 5, 6 years old, but we didn't realize it. You know what I mean? We're all getting on with each other. And that's how we were. You know, I'm having a 50th school reunion this year on the 27th of July. And a couple of the guys, sorry, I'm going to bore you for just 2 more minutes.
People wanting to ask questions.
Let me just finish it. I had a phone call and it was a long number, an overseas number. And I thought, who the hell's this? And I went, hello? He said, is that George? I went, yeah. He said, George, it's Mo Batty. I said, Mo from school. And he went, yeah. I said, where are you? He said, I'm on Normanton Road, not in America, Normanton Road. So he brought his American phone and we met up and had a chat. And then we decided that what we're going to do is have a reunion this July. Yeah. So it's everybody. So it's all the Irish lads, Pat Mooney, Francis O'Reilly, all the Indian lads, all the Pakistani lads, all the Jamaican lads. We're all going to get together and just reminisce on all the naughty things with the 50 odd years. So, Steve.
Just talked about the elders earlier.
Yeah.
I'm very conscious of the way in which you valued those elders.
Yeah.
The presentation at Chatsworth.
Right, yeah.
It's a great story, George.
Right.
If you could tell it. Yes, and the funny bits.
Right. Obviously, when you have a partner that's a high sheriff, then you're fairly well connected. So we had William Burlington, who is, you know, the Duke of Devonshire, come up to our little 2-bedroom cottage for supper, and he really is a lovely guy, you know. And he was saying, George, I've heard all about your Windrush thing. We've got to have it at Chatsworth. I'm thinking, bloody hell, you know, George. So I said, yeah, sure. So he said, let's work out a date, blah, 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 blah. So we got a date sorted. I wish I brought some photos now. The exhibition, which at the time was about 15 banners, it's now about 30 odd banners, was in, have any of you guys been to the Painted Hall at Chatsworth? Yeah. So as you walk in, it's a long hall and the stairs at the far end. So all down the left-hand side were all the banners. And so we did all of that. There was a champagne reception. All the great and the good were there. And then we went through to the carriage rooms for dinner, blah, 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 blah. And everyone sat down, and William Burlington did a little speech. Teresa did a little speech and then said, George, you need to do a speech. And it just came out of my head. I just said, thank you all so much for attending this evening. It's just been fantastic. I would have had a larger exhibition, but William, you need to have a bigger place, mate. You need to get space a lot bigger, you know, and it went down a storm. It probably sounded better at the time when I said it, but, you know, the idea that I couldn't get somewhere bigger than Chatsworth House is, you know, crazy. But yeah, he's been really supportive, very supportive. And he wants us to do something else this year. I'm not sure what yet, but yeah.
George, didn't you also acknowledge the elders during that?
Of course, yes, I did. Yes. Sorry, Steve, you're absolutely spot on. At the dinner, Teresa and I had invited a number of elders. And so we were sat there, and then once I'd taken the pee out of William Burlington having a place that's not big enough to house my fabulous exhibition, what I then did was I asked the elders to stand up. And I then made everyone aware that every one of these elders had been in this country for over 60 years. So they've contributed to this country for over 60 years. And then I then asked everyone in the room, and I think it was about 150 guests, to applaud the elders. Because it occurred to me that these elders had never been recognised. Never been recognised for their contribution to this country, apart from possibly their own children, but they have never, ever been recognised. And that, you know, there just happened to be X amount of elders in the room. But, you know, I know from knowing Cecile's parents, and obviously my own parents, arriving at the time that they arrived and working. Bottom line is, these people gave the best years of their life to this country, you know, and then to get to a point now where people are still chasing money for, you know, the Windrush scandal. We know it's going to be something similar to the post office scandal, where they're just going to drag it out and drag it out and drag it out and hope that people die before they get any payment. So, you know, yeah. Yeah,
just a comment really. I think this type of presentation and any type of narrative of migration is not just important for the indigenous British population, but it's perhaps more important for people later generations, whose parents experience the hardship, challenges, for them to really, you know, not be complacent, to recognize the struggle generation went through.
Yeah.
I remember I was 7 years old. In those days, you used to go to a language center.
Yeah.
Which is opposite Petrie School. And I remember once one of the Chinese lad, he spat in our food, and we couldn't say, we couldn't express that particular experience because we couldn't speak English.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we're trying to resolve, you know, kids fight, we all kind of feel out. But, you know, how do you explain a conflict issue in language we don't understand? And so, I mean, I was nothing compared to what your generation or the previous generation went through. But it's really important for us people as well to really, you know, remember the struggles and recognize the joint contribution.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. I loved your presentation. I'm sure we could all sit here and listen to your more of what you have to share all evening, really. I have to confess I was surprised. My mum went to America for a couple of years and she was, you know, same time as your parents came here, or when Thomas Dowse.
Yeah.
And she would have told stories of signs of no Irish, no blacks. She never said no dogs. But I never knew that that was actually also true in the UK.
Yeah.
Because it was many years later when I came myself. This is hugely valuable, as well as being, you know, hugely interesting and deeply moving.
Mm.
Do you have plans to take it into schools? Because I'm really concerned that they, you know, the youngsters of today really learn the proper.
I'm in the middle of speaking with Embark. Do you guys know Embark? So which do the academies. So the plan, my objective is to get it into schools. That's the key thing. I've got this sort of weird warped sort of belief that when you get to, I'm not saying you can't continue to learn, but when you get to a certain age, it's harder to get through. So I want to, get the younger people so that they know and understand the real history of this country. Now, I was born here and I love living in this country. And if you look at, I play heavy metal music, believe it or not, right? Along with other stuff. But throughout my childhood at school, this is something that came up in one of the documentaries. I was at school primarily in the 60s. The 60s was one of the most turbulent times in history. And during that time, Medgar Evers was murdered. I don't know if you guys know, Medgar Evers was, along with Martin Luther King. Right? No. In America.
Civil rights.
Yeah, civil rights. And he got shot on his doorstep in front of his kids by a KKK guy in 1962. You then had Malcolm X being murdered. You then had JFK, Martin Luther King, So that whole decade was just filled with, you know, and yet at school, it was never mentioned. You know, I would be told about Battle of Hastings, William the Conqueror, Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth, you know, and no one told me that Queen Elizabeth was one of the driving forces behind slavery. No one told me that Horatio Nelson, one of the key things that he did was patrol the seas to make sure no one stopped the slave ships going in. These are things that people don't know. You know, you have a column in London with Nelson sat on top of it or stood on top of it. And it's like, oh, great. This is Great Britain. I don't mind that, but get the truth. Tell the truth. Because what happens is idiots take this stuff and think this is what this country is all about. You know, we need honesty about what this country's done. You know, my surname is Grignon. How the hell did a black man end up with this French surname? You know, same applies. Right. Scottish, you know. So it's just being honest about stuff. And if you start with honesty and clarity, I believe that you can go forward because we're sharing this. It's a shared history.
I think Steve wants.
George, can I just thank you on behalf of
Sure. Yeah.
And I also, Dominic, just make sure, and I'm sure you would have done this, that we actually embrace the work and support the work formally within our minutes that George is doing. And it may well be that there is more work that we can do to support that commitment to education that you've articulated this evening. It sounds very exciting in the future. So hopefully, with people's permission, you and I can have that conversation as a starting point.
I don't think most people know that Steve and I are neighbours.
And Yes, as the chair, George, I really want to thank you for presenting the past behind the present. This is an ongoing narrative, and you are right that there needs to be some sort of distillation of history and take it into our educational institutions. And I have to depart from you one respect. I think we're always learning irrespective of where we are within our education structures. But I do agree that the younger ones are probably more are likely to engage with what, but I think we should take it into our structures. I'm in higher education. I know that I spoke at university on this topic with respect to a raft of issues. So once again, thank you so much.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to follow on actually. It's one of the things that I've been talking about with head teachers about inclusive curriculum, but actually anti-racist. And so it is about changing and realising that racism is still alive in many different forms, and everything we should do as a collective group of people around the table that are passionate about children and people in Derby and the value of education to transform lives is that we really commit to exploring what an anti-racist curriculum looks like, including a religious education, but actually to think about it more especially in the context of cultural bias and that exists today. So I think there are things that we need to do to start from, and having people's history and social history and that connects to Derby is very, very important for our young people to see people like them making a success. If they see success, they can be success. It is something that I'm very passionate about. Could see that we could very possibly step into.
Sorry. Oh no. Well, you yourself.
No,
and then finally.
It's a very quick one. I totally agree. But in school, we haven't got around to the thoughts of doing this sort of thing in Black History Week month or whatever, and then the rest of the year would get better.
That's the curriculum. Absolutely agree. It's not 1 month; it's every month.
It's throughout. It should be embedded.
So I've been an activist in the National Education Union for a number of years. One of the key groups in there is the Black Teachers Caucus.
Right.
And I was actually, me and one of my colleagues, Malcolm from the Guyanese background, we spearheaded taking into account education system, but also our own general secretary in terms of what they've done for Black educators over the past number of decades. And that precipitated independent report by the Runnymede Trust called the Barriers Report. And so key contributors to that. And now we're proud to say that we have a new general secretary who is an ethnic minority, Daniel Kebede.
Right.
He came up through the ranks behind us, so I feel really proud of that. And that brought the anti-racist dialogue within education and is now calling for anti-racist curriculum. So, I'm actually really pleased to be here and offer myself as a resource towards, the things of
just to highlight what Imran said. It's all great changing curriculums and trying our best from that front. What about the educators that are teaching the children? We're all going to have our own preconceived biases. We all come from different places as well. What are we going to do to tackle that? I finished university about 2 years ago now. Grew up in Normanton. I still live there. It's at the Cambridge Sunshine Shop. I remember exactly where it is, around the corner from myself where I live. And growing up in that area, I also went to Mickleover to go to secondary school. So I experienced even racism about 5-6 years ago. It's still alive. It's still kicking. And unfortunately, yes, changing the curriculum is brilliant. But if educators themselves are not willing to change, that is a massive limitation into what we're going to achieve. So that is something that we do need to discuss, and how we tackle that. That's I want to everybody else as well.
Thank you.
Sure. Two tiny points. Certainly about history. I can echo the points that when I entered Dale School I was 30 years old. First World War, Second World War, mostly about white.
Yeah.
No contribution ever mentioned from the Indian front. Over 1 million soldiers from that front was fighting. 80,000 of them actually died fighting for the country. They not knew what they were fighting for or whom they were dying for. No mention ever. Second thing I will say is current problem, which has been lingering on for so long, is the languages. The German would be welcomed, French is welcomed, Spanish and all that. But the home languages, Punjabi is the second largest language spoken in this country. And yet hardly there's any school which will support actually. So most of the, like the mosques and the gurdwaras, they've been supporting it sort of on a local level. And then suddenly when it comes to the entry for GCSE or A level, the school at which they're making the entry takes all the credit. So we get left out. So it's a big, big problem, which really need to be highlighted. So thank you for this presentation. I hope it doesn't just end in itself.
No, no, it worked not for me.
Yeah.
You're the final one, if you don't mind.
Just a quickie as well, because it isn't just in education. I agree completely with all that's been said, and I would like it to go into primary schools actually, because that's where I think that's the local history I remember learning better than what I learned in secondary. But it's also in the news. I mean, I'm from Ireland. You never hear a thing about Ireland in British news. It's only across the water. It's, you know, the country is full of Irish people, but you don't hear Irish news. What's going on in Ireland? You don't hear what's going on in India. You don't hear what's going on in Pakistan. What do we hear? What's happening in London and in America? But most of us haven't got that many ties to America. So it needs, it's a sea change across the whole of society that's needed. But, you know, I'm sure you guys would like to hear what's happening. You know, you think, well, there's really interesting stuff happening in the Caribbean, but you never know. We don't get to hear it in the news.
Right, you may regret asking me, but I'd like to rock the boat a bit. Because I agree with everything you said, and I think how important it is. I agree with everything everybody said. But if we're not careful, we're in danger of this becoming a sump where things get lauded and stop. So I want to know, what is our route as SACRE for making recommendations to schools? Because we are talking about the RE, the religious. But these issues go far beyond that. They're very important in particularly history, but also in PSHE and community relations and all of this. And we can talk in this room till the cows come home. I want to know what's going to happen now. Who's going to take this and say, SACRE are recommending, as a body of people that are responsible for the RE curriculum, to the education department in Derby City Council and Derbyshire City Council, and say, we would like to recommend that all schools have this presentation of Windrush. We would like to recommend that the history curriculum is widened out so that it truly represents the different ethnic communities within Derby, as well as the white community. Because otherwise, it's been very nice, but it won't have any impact. So I'm sorry, but I just don't want things to stop in this room.
Thank you.
Well, I'm here, so you can, I will be taking it forward.
Thank you. Excellent. That's what I wanted to know, because I just got frustrated that we talk about these things and we all have little pockets of information and all certain things that we want to do, but unless it goes somewhere, we're not achieving anything.
I think it also need to go in the other direction, not just to the schools, but to the government as well. So that the recommendation and syllabuses are set.
Agreed. So who's going to do that?
And what would be useful, Judith, because you're involved in educating those that are going to teach our children. So the teacher education is the body that's responsible for the curriculum, the teachers, trainees.
I'm happy to take that to the DTSA. I can certainly take it to the DTSA because they may be able to have something like the Windrush presentation.
Yeah. So get a motion that goes to the cabinet member responsible so that they do write to government.
so that it goes up against.
Exactly, yes.
Shall you and I confer?
Let's remind ourselves who it is and then.
Councillor. Councillor.
Yes, and Steve?
Sorry, could I just say, please don't be sorry for what you said. Because I think we are grappling with the enormity of what we're talking about tonight. And it's something more than a Sacre that meets 3 times a year.
Yes.
And talks about its issues.
Yes.
We're suggesting, I think, that this Sacre, Derby City Sacre, at this moment in time, has a profound opportunity to do something significant.
Yes,
And
exactly.
all the different connections together and make a coherent whole of what we're talking about. It is the most ambitious project, I think, that can be undertaken at this moment in time. And we will do so, even if we find ourselves criticising national policy because it doesn't address some of the issues that we have been motivated by this evening.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to say sorry.
Yeah.
I want you to keep saying it.
Well, I would say hooray.
Yeah. Education is about fatigue.
Yes.
All right, so never ever apologise for building into our children ourselves
Absolutely.
analytical skills of critique. That's what education is.
We also know, don't we, that children have an enormous sense of social justice
Absolutely.
that we need to tap into.
Wow, doing yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you all for that, George. What have you facilitated? You facilitated. You have
It feels much lighter now.
institutional transformation in terms of education, knowledge, and how we engage our young people, and the sorts of package of knowledge that we want in our society to change minds, transform minds, and liberate people to a degree, and address issues of social justice. Thank you. Thank you so much once again. Thank you. So, when you were.
So we were discussing item 7 before George's presentation.
Yes.
There's just one more thing I'd like to add on to that, is that the Sacre discussion people can see on the agenda, that's the National Association of Sacres. We have signed up for that now. It's just going through the final stage of procurement, and then as soon as that's finished, we'll get logins that I share with everyone so they can log in and access those. So I think again, there's a bit of work that the works and really discuss. And then at the next meeting, we could have no close out on that one.
Do you want to just explain yourself?
Okay, so it's sort of linked on with what Judith was saying about making sure that the community actually does something rather than talks about stuff.
Yes.
And the National Association of Sacres is there to support Sacres. So they have the staff, they have training facilities, there are webinars that you can join, all sorts of things. But the most important document, I think, for us is a self-evaluation. I haven't been able to look at the document yet because we haven't had the logins. But it's aimed as a sort of year process. You can either try and do it all at once, or you can do it one part per term. I would recommend, I fully confess I haven't looked at it yet, but that we do this one part per term. So I've spoken to other Sacres. So the RE Hubs had a meeting a while ago for people from East Midlands to talk about Sacres and things. There was a lady from Northampton who that's what they did. So they did a meeting. It makes it more manageable rather than trying to do it all at once. So whilst as much as there's a definite need to get going as quickly as possible, we've got to make this a manageable job. What I would like to propose to the meeting is that once we've got the logins, the people on the working committee can start the process. We can start looking at what exactly we need to do. So there are questions about how does this work if you don't have an RE advisor, for example, which we don't have. Are you happy for the small group of us to start looking at this once we can access it? That's my possible.
All of us.
After we've had a look, yes. So then at the next meeting, hopefully, we'll turn that off. We can have a look at it, we can discuss it, we can work out exactly what we need to do, and then we can present it for you to look at. Because effectively, as far as I'm aware, this is a committee job. This is what we all need to be involved in. But we need to do a little bit of prep work and foundation work before we can do that.
It's also part of our regeneration sense of purpose.
Yeah.
In terms of future. We are going to be a dynamic Sacre.
Yeah.
We think that's a good, that's a good starting point. Indeed. I'd also say for everybody who articulates that wish, it doesn't involve resource and it does involve time. It involves more than simply turning up collectively to those meetings 3 times a year.
That's why I think the working party needs to have a look at this, because otherwise we're just pushing it to the next meeting and then it's me telling you what it is, which then gets pushed on to the next meeting. I think the urgency is such that we need to be working in between these meetings.
So the action with respect to the self-evaluation, actually,
so once we've got the login,
get the login, work with the.
We can have a look at it, and the working party can work out, particularly whether we need to spread this over the 3 terms, which I think we will, but we need to look at it first.
And we will bring something back.
And then we can come back
for the next meeting.
So that we can hopefully start it.
Okay, thank you.
Question about the login. Is that from login for all the members of the SACRE, or is there just one login that this SACRE group shares?
That's what we will find out.
Yeah, I'm not sure yet.
So as far as what I've been told by the SACRE, anyone on a SACRE should be able to access the materials on there. So there's all sorts of support documents that you can read that can help you with what you want to achieve on the committee. I just don't know the practicalities of how the login actually works. It might be one and we'll just use it. I don't know.
Yeah, all I know is they changed the password in September to make sure you resubscribe. But
thank you.
Okay, right. Okay, thank you for that. The syllabus school questionnaire. Zoe, did you want to say something about that topic?
Yeah, so when we had the last working party, we were talking about the fact that will be the new syllabus, and I proposed that we put a questionnaire out to teachers who are currently using the current syllabus, actually to see what they think about that, how they find it, what works. Consider so because they're the people that are using it in week out, day in, day out. Just a really short sort of, what works well, what doesn't work well, what would you like to see as part of this? So it's not going to take long for weeks. So it'd be great to be able to then get that out to as many teachers across city and the county really, for both syllabuses are the same, work together. So I can share a link for that.
Yes. Please do.
If I can share that with sort of everybody, and then if people can share that with their contacts in education, that would be.
I can also make sure that it's put onto the school's information portal for Derby City.
Brilliant.
Send out to members.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So that's part of our early engagement with the agreed syllabus revision.
Yes.
So
So it's
You're right, it's Zoe, yeah. Okay, thank you. Sure, Dominic will send out the information to our people. Okay, I think it's Sharon, I know we development plan, but I think I've been asked. Yeah.
It might be me.
But I've got Sharon to speak. Sorry, I don't know if I've got you down. Well, not for that, but I've got you down to do something, but I may have misunderstood. Go on.
Those of us who work in education will be very familiar with the notion of a development plan or a school improvement plan that identifies our priorities for the coming year. suggesting the centre would give, so it's something in the middle. All the track, and only about here. So you begin to work on what that school improve, that great development plan might look like. And what actions will be required, what resources it might need, and what significantly how to improve. You know, it feels like this evening has provided us with an opportunity to say, you know what, there's something more than a group of folks who meet once every term, and we can do something profound and significant.
Absolutely.
And we ought to capture that within our school improvement, our SACRE improvement aspirations. So with your permission, I think we might, I know we're giving the working people a lot to do, but we might give the working with the opportunity to talk about what those priorities are for 2024, 2026.
Who's on the working group?
There's Phil Royal as well,
Phil.
but he is standing down at the next meeting, so if there's anyone else who's.
Yeah, okay.
I'd like myself forward as well.
Okay, yes, yeah.
It's good.
Okay, right. So the action here, just to bring that this is yet another task for the working group to go away and come up with a palette things for me. No, I don't know. With some ideas. We'll come back and forward. Thank you. And there are two individuals here who wish to join working group in due course.
And at the moment, that's working group meets remotely.
The information you feed.
Yeah.
Dimly, yeah, okay. Right. I think we're done.
Yeah, that's good.
Excellent.